Hello, and welcome to another episode of Winning Where It Matters. My name is Kyei Amoako, and it's a pleasure to have you join me once again. I recently had the same conversation with two different people in the same day. The experiences were quite different. One person asked a lot of questions and gave very few pieces of advice. And in the other conversation, the person gave lots and lots of advice and asked very few questions. I took something away from those experiences that I would like to share with you because I think those will be helpful as we go about in trying to give advice and trying to be helpful. Because giving advice is something that we all do instinctively, especially when somebody shares a goal, a challenge, or something they're trying to do. And I hope my suggestions could help you help people more. When I started sharing what I was trying to do in the first conversation, anytime I said something that was exciting, the person I was talking to had a suggestion. Oh, you should do this. You should do this. This is going to be great for you to do. And it felt a little awkward because every time there was a suggestion, I had to pause to acknowledge the suggestion and then try to get back on track. In the second conversation about the same topic, I felt like the person I was talking to asked a lot of questions. Questions like, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? What have you tried prior to having this conversation? What would success look like? These were questions that, quite frankly, got me to pause and to think a little bit more because even though I thought about some of those things, in that moment when they asked the question, I gave it more thought. And I thought that those helped the conversation along in a way that got me thinking more than just trying to react to suggestions. Now, I think both of their hearts were in good places, but the two conversations felt very differently. One felt a little bit more suffocating because it felt like I was struggling to keep up with the conversation and trying to stay on message with what I was talking about. Whereas the other one felt like I had room to express what I was thinking and keep the conversation going. One felt like I felt a little obliged to take the suggestions, and the other one felt like I had room to think and come up with my own suggestions. I think when it all comes down to it, it wasn't that one was bad and the other one was good, but I think one was more helpful than the other. I think asking questions gives us opportunities to tailor the advice and speak to things that the other person may not have considered already. Because by asking questions, you're also able to know what the person's priorities are so that your advice could align a little bit more to where they're trying to go. We all give advice. I give advice, and sometimes I give advice before I'm asked to give advice, or sometimes I give advice before asking questions. And then when I catch myself, I try to step back and ask some more clarifying questions because when you do that, you give the person room to think about things they've not thought about. And that helps the conversation along. And I think in the long run, you help the person a lot more. It's different when the person asks you directly for advice or asks you, what do you think? And even in those instances, I think it's helpful to ask clarifying questions. Just probe just a little bit, probe a little bit for a little more information so that you're not doing the work for them, but you're helping them think about it. And being on the receiving end of two experiences where one asked a lot of questions, not in a rapid fire kind of way, but in a thoughtful, manner where when they asked the question, they waited for me to answer. And I felt like they genuinely wanted to know what I thought or what I had considered. And in answering those questions and thinking about it, I took those questions with me. Even after the conversations, those questions, I played them back and it helped me evaluate versus just trying to implement or carry along suggestions that came from the individual in the first conversation. And so I would highly recommend that you ask a lot of questions and listen to the answers before giving advice. In doing so, you're more likely to help people more with your advice. And for those of us on the receiving end of questions, I encourage us to stay open. Stay open to the questions when you reach out to somebody for advice and they ask you lots of questions. That's a good thing. That's a good thing because by asking you questions, they're giving you a chance to think, to think thoughts that you may not have considered prior to that conversation. And in the long run, that is more helpful. I found it more helpful, and I hope you find it more helpful when people ask you more questions before giving advice. If there's any way that I could be of help, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be glad to connect. And as always, I believe in you, and I hope you believe in yourself too. I'll see you on the next one.